Welcome to the Zions Bank Economic Update. I'm Robert Spendlove, the Senior Economist for Zions Bank. So we had an interesting announcement earlier this week that the U.S. economy is now officially in a recession. So what does it actually mean to be in a recession? And another thing I want to discuss is when and how will we come back out of it? So first, looking at what a recession is. The broad definition of a recession is a period of expansion that has ended, and now the economy is contraction. When we look back at the last economic expansion, we know that it was 128 months long. That is the longest economic expansion in our nation's history. Past economic expansions before the current one that we just ended had generally been about 4 years in length. The last economic expansion was over 10 years. 10 years and 8 months to be specific. So the expansion ended in February. How do we know that it ended? So the general rule of thumb definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, or of GDP dropping. Now, we haven't seen that yet. We know that the first quarter of 2020 saw GDP drop by 5%. But we don't, and we think we know that the second quarter will also see negative GDP, potentially as high as 20 or 30%. But we're still in the second quarter. So how can we know that we're actually in a recession when we haven't had those 2 consecutive quarters of GDP? There's a much more precise definition that economists often use for defining a recession, and it's produced by the National Bureau of Economic Research. And the National Bureau of Economic Research, or NBER, defines a recession as a period of sustained economic drop. And so that's what we're seeing right now, is a sustained drop in overall economic conditions. And that can be beyond just GDP. In fact, one of the measures that we use quite often to look at that is employment growth and the unemployment rate. When we look at unemployment and employment, we can see kind of where the last trough was, or where previous lows were, how the economy then expanded, and then how it contracted. During the years of 2008 and early 2009 was our last recession, where we had an increase in unemployment and a drop in employment. Then coming out of that recession, unemployment dropped through the period from 2009 until 2020, and then we had employment growing. Now, in February, that trend started to reverse. So February was that what we would call a peak in employment growth, and also that trough in unemployment. And now we've seen a reversal, and we've seen unemployment going up and employment coming down. If we look at past recessions, we see there is a strong correlation between that unemployment and overall expansion in recessions. When unemployment goes up significantly, it coincides with recessions. And when it comes down, it coincides with expansions. So that's one of the critical ways for us to know that we are officially in a recession. So the question is now, we've timed that peak. That peak was in February. When do we know that we've hit that trough? When do we know that the recession has ended and the economy is once again starting to expand? And there's a few different ways of looking at that. We call them kind of transitional or high velocity indicators. And one of the ones that we've been looking at really closely is, once again, employment and unemployment, but also unemployment insurance claims. And that's one of the areas that we've been seeing some signs that the economy actually may be improving. If we go back to March 26th of this year, that's where we saw kind of a high point in unemployment. Unemployment insurance claims topped 6.8 million claims on March 26th. The latest data that we've seen is now showing an additional 1.5 million unemployment insurance claims. Still very high, but it's come down quite a bit from where it was in late March. Another sign of that is the jobs report that came out recently, where we were expecting unemployment to go up and job growth to go down, but we actually saw the unemployment rate drop and we added 2.5 million jobs. So we're starting to see some signs that the economy is coming out of the recession and actually may be emerging to a period of growth. Even with that, it's really important to also acknowledge, even though there are early signs that the recession may be ending or maybe we may be coming out of it, we're still in a very deep hole. Even though we've added 2.5 million jobs, about 20 million people have lost their jobs in the US, and it'll take some time to kind of repair the economy and be back to where we were before. And that's really what we're going to be watching very closely now, is to see if the economy has bottomed and what that recovery will look like coming out of this. Thanks for watching this economic update. I'm Robert Spendlove, and we'll see you next time.